Expectations are rooted in the past, influence the present, and impact the future. What do I mean by that? Where do we get our expectations from? We get our expectations from basically life itself. We can take a look at somebody and how they're dressing and how they're acting and form an expectation about that person. We could hear from somebody else some comments about a person and their reputation, and that gets inside of us, and we set an expectation about it. Expectations are rooted in the past, something happened, and they influence the present, but they really impact the future. And I have on your notebook a chart we made to explain this. Across the top, you'll see boxes. That represents the teacher. You'll see a bunch of arrows going between that and a circle at the bottom. And as the circle moves toward the top, it changes until it finally is identical to the box. And I want to show you how this works. First of all, the first box says the teacher constructs an expectation. Okay, how would that work? Well, let's say that you are a teacher of the 3rd grade. And you are getting a coffee with your teachers as 1 year ends, and the teacher from the 2nd grade says to you, I hope you don't get Tony in your class. He is a disaster. He will disobey you. He'll create a ruckus. I hope that Tony is in the other class, not your class. Well, you think so too. And so the summer passes, and you are the teacher, the 3rd grade, and these young kids, little boys and girls, are coming in the door, and you're asking them their names, and they're saying, I'm such and such, and this little cute boy walks in, and you say, so what's your name? My name is Tony. What? My name is Tony. You're Tony. Tony, you better behave yourself, son. Student reacts to an expectation. The teacher communicates expectation through behavior. Tony, you're going to sit right here. And young man, if you disobey, I'm sending you to the principal. Whoa. She hadn't said that to anybody else but Tony. Tony then responds to the behavior. Why? Teacher expects Tony to misbehave. Guess what Tony's going to do? He's going to live up to your expectations. And as he misbehaves, you confirm your expectation. Well, she was right. I can't believe I got Tony. And Tony reflects the expected behavior until lastly, the box that is there, the student conforms to the expectation of the teacher. Put that in your box, in your notebook. Student conforms to the expectation. My opening story to you regarding my expectations of Section 2 is exactly what I just showed you. That is, I had expectations that the interaction of Section 2 would be this high compared to the other 2 sections. And I expected their papers to be a whole other level of excellence. And guess what had happened? That's exactly what happened. I expected their grades to be better, and they were better. Therefore, I've come away from that years ago convinced there's something else going on here. And I better control my expectations. Now, the psychologists wanted to find out more about this. They wanted to find out if a teacher has low expectations, that is, he says to or she says to herself, these students are worthless. They're not going to learn anything. They're not going to graduate past 6th grade. Why should I even work hard about this? That's low expectations. If the teacher walks in and says, these students are going to be outstanding. They're going to finish school, and 3/4 of them will go to college and they'll become the leaders in our country. The difference of the expectation. So they wanted to test this, and they did. They tested by setting the teacher's expectations by telling teachers untruths. They told certain teachers that the class you have are the lowest students in the whole school, and you just have to deal with it. And another teacher, they told them they have the greatest students, etc. They set the expectations on purpose. And then what happened is, behind the glass, without them knowing it, the psychologists were videotaping for an entire school year the behavior of these teachers, more than just two, a whole bunch of them, who had low expectations and had high expectations. Then they put the two videos next to each other, and they compared everything for an entire year. They wanted to know what happens with low expectations versus medium versus high expectations. Will it change everything? And I put in my book, The 7 Laws of the Learner, some of the results of a teacher with low expectations. I want to ask you a question before I read these. Does the nation where you live, do the teachers have high expectations or low expectations? Interesting question, isn't it? What happens if your expectations are really low? You will cripple your students. You will cripple your students. Because another teacher who has a whole other viewpoint, a whole other worldview, these students are created in the image of God, as much as I'm created in the image of God. And they have to overcome more difficult things than I've ever had to overcome. And I can call greatness out of them. And they're going to be great. They're going to love my class to death. And when I'm done, not one of them is dropping out of school. I won't permit it. I don't care what happens in their family. I'll go visit their family. I'll help them. They're going to love learning, and I'm going to turn them around. Whoa! What's the difference? The inside secret power of a teacher. So listen to this. A couple lists. I'll just read them quickly. They're not in your notebook, but they make a lot of sense from the study of the research undertaken over years of time to discover how expectations impact teaching. When interacting in a class, teachers with low expectations tend to do the following. 1, wait less time for the student to answer a question. If I have low expectations and I ask you the question, I won't wait very long. If you don't know, I'll move to somebody else. When I have high expectations, I'll give you more time. They will call on students less frequently to answer a question because it irritates them. They will inappropriately reinforce the incorrect answer. And they know it's wrong. But because they have such low expectations, they won't want to teach that person. And they say, well, that's the best they can do. And they, oh, good job. You'll do better next time. And that's it. They'll prematurely give the student the answer before the person had a chance to really think it through. They'll actually interrupt more quickly when the student makes mistakes. They'll criticize the student more often for failure. They'll praise the student less often when they succeed. They'll write less comments on the papers they grade by far than a person with high expectations. They'll fail to give specific or positive feedback regarding the student's response. They'll interact with the student more privately than publicly, and they'll maintain eye contact far less because they have low expectations. What am I trying to show you here? Your expectation changes your behavior without you knowing it, and your behavior affects them. And something that can't be understood through your eye contact, your tone of voice, how much you encourage, how much you praise, is all based upon what you really expect. Number 4, expectations are exposed by our attitudes and our actions. Our actions. That's number 4. That's what we've been talking about. Number 5, expectations influence the future. They influence the future, whether stated or unstated. This is a part that I want to include because it's hard to believe. That is, I never said a word about Section 2. You don't have to state your expectations. They're powerful in the room. So the psychology department of a major university wanted to test this with animals who didn't understand your vocabulary. And so they got some graduate students, some students getting their masters. And they had 72 graduate students, and they divided them into two halves, 36 students studying their master's degree and 36 others. And they said, we want to experiment with you, and we have a maze here, a difficult thing to walk around. Some have dead ends, and they're hard to go through. And we have been breeding rats for generations until we have 2 sets of rats. These rats are maze-smart rats. They have, over the generations, learned how to be incredibly fast on getting through the maze. These rats are stupid. They can barely get out of the first part. And what we want for the semester is for you 36 and you 36 to see if you can't get these really fast ones quicker with your group and the stupid maze as fast as you can. Then they hid the cameras. When you believed you had a maze-smart rat, they named every single rat. They gave them names. They petted them. They brought extra food for the rats. And when they were encouraging their rats, they were saying, come on, baby, you could do it. I know you could do it. And they were encouraging the rat. On the other side, they called their rat stupid, dumb, dumber, and dumbest. They constantly criticized the rats. And at the end of the semester, the difference between the maze-smart rats and the maze-stupid rats, these rats were 5 times faster than the maze-stupid rats. The rats couldn't understand a thing. The professor set the expectations of the students because the rats were identical. And they came away and said, when we set the expectation of the student that these would be fast and these would be slow, that's exactly what they did. And then there's even one farther than that. Oh, man. One teacher and a professor, somehow, erroneously, the administration of the college sent him the IQs of the people in one of his classes and sent another page of IQs. And at the end of the semester, they compared the grades the student earned with the IQ. And they matched. When the IQs were up, the students got really high grades. But this list of IQs were the locker numbers in the hallway. They weren't the IQs. And because the teacher thought they were IQs, because this page was the IQs, and these were all lower numbers, they had expectations. Well, they'll never amount to much. Look at their IQs. My goodness, they're low. And when they compared the students' grades who had the locker numbers, you know, where you store your books, these people almost failed. And our IQs weren't here. Therefore, the expectations of the teacher determined whether you failed or passed inside the classroom based upon faulty information. What are you learning? Come on, what are you learning? That the expectations in countries where the education is the poorest is determined not by the parents, not by the government, but by the teachers. And the teachers form very poor expectations. You're not going to finish even 6th grade. You're not going to amount to anything. And guess what happens? The students live up to expectations. Change your expectations around. You're in front of people that are immortal. They will live forever. They don't live forever in the past. That's God. But God says that we will live forever. And he made them in the image of himself. And that person If they have the right teacher, that person can be transformed right before your eyes by one person, a teacher. So sometimes the whole country needs to change their expectation. Isn't that what President Mandela did for South Africa? When he started about 10, 12 years ago talking about the need for education, that the future of our countries depend upon education. And the expectation about the importance of education changed because President Mandela talked about it this way, in noble, uplifting ways. And education became something more valued in South Africa. But now it's time for the teachers, not just of South Africa, but of Africa for the most part, to rise up. You could lead the whole world. It's determined by the teachers, not by the government, not by their pay, not where you meet in a school. It's by the teachers. Teachers make great students, or they don't. Does this make sense to you? Isn't it not time to happen here? It is time. That's why we pray that tomorrow there'll be hundreds and hundreds of public and private school teachers that go through this course. This material, the Russian government said to me, this is the most transforming material we've ever had in the history of Russia. It's changed our teachers. This can change a country. Well, as you can see, I'm pretty excited about this. Maxim number 6. Expectations impair others if set too low or too high for too long. If your expectations remain low for a long period of time, society, watch this, society will drift down, 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 down until everybody is at this level. If you're the opposite and you're an extremist and your student, if your parent comes in and has 5 A's and 1 B plus, and you say, what's the matter with you? How come you got a B plus? Those expectations will cripple the person as much as a person who has low expectations. Number 7. Number 7. Expectations empower others when guided by love. Love believes all things. Love hopes. Come on, all things. That's what expectations are, is love. In a sense, I want you to think about a little child that's starting out. And I have a cartoon series for you about how the mother and father and their expectations affect this little apple tree. Take a look at this in our cartoon. They're watering it, they're loving it, they're believing it. I remember our daughter sent us a little video when they were living in Scotland about their baby, and how Jessica was helping a little shepherd learn to crawl and then walk. And all of the affirmation and the love, and you can do it. Come on, sweetie, take a step. And Stu, the husband, coming in here and cheering and throwing him around, and all this stuff going on. And then I remember going to the store after seeing that and watching a man with a baby a little bit older than that, and the harshness and the abuse and the words he called his son. He was destroying his son. Right there, right in the store. He was destroying his son. And the way that you respond to a human being affects greatly what happens to the human being. So as they grow older, maybe it's a teacher that takes that young child and grows them up as this cartoon illustrates, gives them plant food, and look at the smile on their face. Then as time goes on, it moves past that. And as the child gets older, the next cartoon occurs in which the child is a part of the coach. The coach is inspiring, giving a blue ribbon. Look at the hands going up. Look at the son smiling. It's all this affirmation and belief and encouragement and calling out greatness from the child. And then it goes to the next level, in which maybe there's some time that that child has gone off the track somewhat. And maybe it's a professor, maybe it's an older person whose friend begins to say, no, these branches are the wrong direction. You're wasting your life here. And they love them enough to correct them, not to just let them go their way wrong. And when that occurs, then the final picture is when that tree is bearing apples and planting apple trees everywhere. That's, in a sense, the picture of the perfect dean right there. He's in his church or her church, but around that person is affecting the 10 people especially. So at the end, they become far more than they can ever dreamt they could be. Does this make sense to you? I remember as I close this session, and we go into the last one, I had a dream when I went to graduate school that I could learn to become an effective Bible teacher. That's what I wanted to be. And when I went to graduate school, I made a decision that's rather unusual. I decided my professors would not be able to set my priorities, that I would set them myself. And I decided nobody would ever ask me what grade I got in all these courses, that the grades weren't important to me. I'm not going to seminary or graduate school or higher education for the grades. I'm going for me. And I'm going to determine my priorities. So I would take a look at the semester's courses I had to take, and I said to myself, what's the most important course to me? I will get an A+ in that course. All the way down to which course do I really not want really to know that much about? And I'll decide I'm going to hardly do that much, and a C's fine with me. That's a success number to me. Could it have been an A? Sure. But I didn't want to give the time to make it an A. And so one semester, in fact, the first semester, I did that. And I picked out my A+ course. It was How to Study the Bible. And that was more important to me than the other 5 courses put together. And I said to Darlene, I'm spending 50% of my time on that course. Well, as I began to work that course, we had a major paper to hand in, and I really poured myself into it. And when you go to graduate school, most of us were afraid of failing. I was afraid of failing. You just don't know if you can pull it off. I didn't. And because I was so committed to learn how to be a person who really knew how to study your Bible, I poured my whole heart into that and handed in a major paper and couldn't wait to get the paper back from the professor. And when I went to graduate school, we had these little mailboxes this big, and they were all there, hundreds and hundreds of them, and I came up, I was number 217, and I opened it up, and I could see my paper was folded inside there, and I almost was afraid to pull it out. And I pulled it out, and it was from, believe it or not, that same man, Dr. Howard Hendricks. And he used to use a big, fat, felt magic marker that was red. He put in great big letters, A+. And he said, Wilkinson, I believe you're going to become one of our country's greatest Bible teachers. I cannot wait to see you. And as a freshman student who was scared to death of failing, for that famous man to say that, I didn't know what to do. I stood there holding the paper like this. This is embarrassing. I stood there like this. Really? He really believes that about me? Because I could barely believe it and hoped for that for me. I walked all the way home, almost holding the paper like this. And I got home and I said to Darlene, sweetheart, look what Dr. Hendricks said about my paper. And she read it and she said, my goodness, sweetie, look at that. And I took that paper and I pinned it to the wall right above where I studied. And all year long, I looked at that sentence. What did he do to this poor, scared to death student? In one comment, he changed my entire perspective. Yes, he did. Because if he believed that, and he's this person, maybe it's true. Maybe my dream isn't that foolish. Well, guess what you are to your students? You're the Dr. Hendricks. And what are you doing with that power? That's power. That's power to influence people in ways you can hardly imagine. What are you doing with it?